Welcome back to Couch to Glen Helen. So I looked it up, and the night riding portion of this race is going to be about 12 to 12 and a half hours. So with the night portion being more than 50% of the race, I figured it's important that I start getting the night riding figured out now. But before I jump into that too deep, I've been playing with the idea of running a playlist at late at night when I get into the wee hours. After riding that 12 hour, I think there may be some benefit to having an earbud and a playlist. So comment down in the section and give me your recommendations for songs to be considered to be thrown into my playlist. All right, so let's jump into it. All right, here we are. It's 4:30 in the morning. We're gonna go out and I'm gonna go out and do my first time out riding on the bike in the dark. Mounted up my Mickey Mouse headlights last night. I'm gonna go give those a try. Never done this before. Running the Task helmet lights, Mickey Mouse style, that it was plenty bright enough to ride with, but I did find that it was hard to ride with in the fact that, not that you couldn't see, but shadows were really very deceptive in reading the trail. So having the lights above your head and the angle shining down steeper, I found that if the ground was at all off-colored or splotchy colored, which in some of our riding areas out here, the soil colors are varied, I found that it was really tough to read the trail. I'm going to be racing in a 2022 FX350. The FX350 does not have any headlight on it. It doesn't have a wiring harness for a headlight. So I got it all wired up, got the headlight on, went out for the very first night ride to give that a shot, and it was going great. I really was liking riding with the headlight and helmet lights. It definitely gave a lot of light to be able to go as fast as I could, at least on the trails that I was riding. And it was going pretty well. Got about a quarter of the way into our ride into a very technical off-camber section, and I just stalled the bike. I went to restart it and the bike was just totally dead. And this trail is very off-camber. There's no trail that goes down below it. It's kind of a bad place. And that night it was still really muddy from rain from earlier in that day. Kind of was at a loss with the newer KTMs. There's no Kickstarter on them, so I decided that my best bet was going to be to roll down the hillside and try to bump start it. But the spot that I was at was very steep, mostly loose boulder field, so there wasn't exactly a clean run to the bottom. I had no headlight. All I had was my helmet lights, which worked pretty good, but it was sketchy. You really couldn't see too far because of the way the land laid. And I got down to the bottom. I tried bump starting as I was rolling down there. I just couldn't get it to fire, partially because I couldn't get the back tire to turn in the mud. It was just dragging mud down the hill rather than rolling. And then when I got down to the bottom of that area, I kept working my way down this ravine trying to get it to bump start until I eventually came to the end of it, which was just a cliff that opens out. And at that point I realized I've got to work with the space I've got, because there's nowhere I can go downhill further to get out. I have to go back up. So I dug through the bike and the wiring, thinking maybe I killed the battery. I wired something, in the wiring harness that I put in for the light, that maybe I did something wrong and drained the battery. And so I was going through and I couldn't find any real issues. And I went through it. I told her disconnected that whole wiring harness, tried and got nothing. About 5:30 in the morning, the sun was starting to peek through a little bit. I reached out to my dad because I was thinking the battery's dead. I can't bump start it. I'm just totally dead in the water here. Well, unfortunately, in the place that I got it stuck is an extremely inaccessible place. All the areas coming into that area and going out of it are steep off-camber single track. There's no way to get anything back there. So my dad came out on a four-wheeler with a jump box. We dug into it further and it wouldn't jump. So the issue wasn't the battery. So I went through the bike piece by piece through the wiring, and eventually I found that the ignition wire after the switch, somewhere right around the back of the headlight, which I hadn't messed with at all, and it had sheared. So when I started the ride, the starter was hanging on probably by a couple strands of copper, and that was it. And then during the course of the ride, it finally disconnected. So once I had found that issue, I was able to touch those lines together to get the bike started, and I was able to ride it out. But I felt bad for having my dad come out in the early hours of the morning. I got that all fixed and repaired. I went out for another night ride with the helmet lights and the night lights, and everything worked just fine. And I've gone on a few more since then, and everything works really good. But I found with the night riding, it is so different of an experience. You look at the trail differently. Shadows present information that you don't have in the daytime. However, there's also things that you normally read in the daytime that you really can't see at night. I changed my front fender graphic to a matte black one from my normal blue one on a white fender, because I was getting a lot of glare in my goggles off the white plastics. So with that change, it definitely improved my ability to ride faster. So when I first started riding at night, my pace on our practice loop was about 3 miles per hour off from my norm. But now I'm down to the point where my night riding speed is on our practice loop is pretty close. Now that we're hitting midsummer, it's hard to compare because the grass, we got so much rain this spring that the grass is so long that seeing the trail in the daytime is a little tough in some areas, and seeing it at night is extremely hard. There's some areas where you're just reading the way the grass is hanging because you actually can't see the ground where the trail is at all. So that's kind of made for an interesting experience, but all in all, the night riding has been a lot of fun. For the start of it, it's pretty solid experience. The hardest part now that we're getting into the middle of summer is part of the day where it's dark is so late. Yeah, either you have to stay up really late or get up really early to be able to ride in the dark. So the night riding's off to a great start. We've definitely had some lessons learned, some gremlins worked out. A bit more practice to go still until Glen Helen, but it's a solid start.